I think a lot of us think of success as money, wealth, fame, likes on your Instagram account, notoriety. And I think a lot of that comes from the world today, society, what they're throwing out, all the marketing and advertising. And I think a lot of us don't ever take the time because we're so busy to really sit down and define what success looks like for us.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son, that, I warmed the tongue up, father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And make sure you do your...
Like warming up after a cold plunge?
Yeah, well, you got to do the do-re-mis and the la-la-la, in the mornings to get things going. And, when Miss Suzanne leaves the house and I'm here all by myself, I ain't talking to myself. And then y'all show up and my tongue ain't ready. So I gotta add a couple minutes of tongue PT to get things going. When was the last time I flubbed up a word in the intro? I flubbed up the words, but not a word.
Yes, sir. No, you got to get some of those, what is it called? The vocal exercises, all those going. I saw a video of, what's his name? Jack Black doing a bunch of those the other day. And I was like, gosh, wow, there's some serious levels to the whole, being able to say a bunch of words fast, pronunciate, all that kind of stuff. And, we got to get that going. Get some PT going.
There you go. We'll add that to our green room routine, like we did with Serena and Liz, where we did what did we do? 10 minutes of silence? No, it wasn't that long. A couple minutes of silence and gathering our thoughts. And speaking of gathering thoughts, gathering our guest in here, Stu Grazier joining us. Stu, did you do any tongue exercises before you joined us this morning?
I did not do any tongue exercises. I did get up early. I didn't do a cold plunge, but I did get out first thing, went as sunrise, and walked around in the beautiful Colorado air, and got a morning walk in, and it was a great day to get going.
Feeling fully refreshed and unbounded in energy, right?
That's right. Yeah, I have two little kiddos, and quite often, at least one of the kiddos comes into the bedroom and starts, waking us up in the middle of the night. And that happened last night. And one of them had a nightmare and wanted to sleep with us. So I was getting kicked all night long and whacked in the face. And so I was up about 3 a.m. And just, once I'm up and my brain starts going, I'm like, all right, let's just go to work. So I got up and got some stuff done and then went for a morning walk right at sunrise. So it's all good. Good morning.
That's awesome. I want to jump into the Kinetic man, and now without getting too much into our physics of kinetic energy and potential energy, but I am kind of curious. Did that flavor have anything to do with you and David calling this your mastermind, the project? I'll let you finish the labeling of it. The Kinetic man and how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, to answer your question, yes, it did. It does. Honestly, we don't want to get to the end of our lives and someone say that, Stu Grazier had a lot of potential, right? I want someone to say Stu Grazier was a man of action. And to that, that's what we're all about, is holding each other accountable to take an action. I'll try to keep a long story short, but David and I, he's my business partner. We were college roommates for all 4 years at the Naval Academy, and we both did 20 years of service in the Navy. We were stationed together in Naples, Italy at about our 15-year mark. And we just started doing life together. We would work out in the mornings together. We would go on swims, go on runs, lift weights. We would meet each other at lunchtime. We were in different roles in the Navy, and but we started traveling together, just doing everything together. And we started talking about like what we would want to do after the Navy. We had both been doing real estate for a little bit. He had been investing in real estate, same with myself. And, again, long story short, we started building out some real estate businesses. And we started doing real estate, flipping houses, buying rental properties, and lots of other stuff in the Department of Real Estate Investing. We were flipping about 50 houses a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And all while we were still in the Navy. David was the commanding officer of a big cyber command in Fort Meade, and I was the executive officer, second in command of a big Navy Reserve Center here in Colorado. And so we found ourselves burnt out, and we were worn out to no end. And we said we were doing all of this real estate and all these businesses on the side for our family, and the words didn't match the actions. We said we were doing it for the family. We said our priorities were our faith and our friends and having fun and our finances and giving and stewardship and all of these areas of our life that we said were a priority, but we weren't doing any of them. I was probably the heaviest, the unhealthiest I've ever been. We weren't going to church on Sundays because that was like my catch-up day. My kids just saw me with a phone in front of my face all the time because I was constantly, dealing with fires, calling investors, on social media, doing email. And I wasn't paying attention to my wife. We were, just roommates, it felt like. And so all these things kind of came to fruition about 2 years prior to us getting out of the military. And we woke up one day and said, like, what are we doing? This is not fun anymore. All we're doing is creating another job for ourselves after we get out of the military, and we have to change some things. So we took some massive pivots in our businesses. We shut down everything. We stopped flipping houses. Everything that we had under the pipeline of flipping, we just turned them into rental properties and kept them for ourselves. And then we took a really hard look at all these priorities that were said were important to us that we weren't taking action on. And we invited 10 men that we knew would show up for us every single week, somewhat like a church small group. And we just started meeting on Zoom. Most of them were either in the military still or recently got out, so veterans. And we started talking once a week and holding each other accountable to taking action and putting all these areas of our life as a priority and redefining success for ourselves in these areas. So that's the short story of Kinetic Man. So we have a podcast associated with that, and then we have the men's group that we meet once a week.
You can't tell us about the podcast now. That's at the end of the show.
That's at the end. Scratch that.
Come on.
I'm curious, Stu, thinking about, the idea of connecting your words to the actions. It brings to mind something we've talked about on the show before, which is the idea of like your wants versus your want to want. So we have all these things that we think that we really want, but it's like we like the idea of it. And I'm curious how that fits into what you're talking about there, because I would almost say that a lot of those things that, you want to get out of your life, your potential, it might fall into that want to want category, but if you take enough action, you're going to actually, be feeling yourself wanted, I guess might be the right way to put it. But what are your thoughts on that want to want aspect?
Yeah, man. I mean, I would want to get up every single morning and like perfect my daily routine, read the Bible, do journaling, go do meditation, go exercise and work out, all the things that I want to do in my morning routine. And of course, it's never perfect. It never happens just as you want it to happen. But with some intentionality and also I think accountability, it gets better and better over time. Right. And so I think you can't do it alone. You have to have somebody else in your corner that's lifting you up and pushing you forward when you fall down. Someone that is going to encourage you to grow in a certain area, and someone who's going to call you out on your BS when you don't do what you said you were going to do, and don't do what you said was a priority in your life. Right. So I think that's the most important thing. You can't want to go to the gym every morning and do it by yourself. You have to find someone, an accountability partner, and be like, hey man, I'll meet you at the gym at 5 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm your accountability partner. Let's go. And then when you don't show up, he's going to call you out. So I think that's the big main difference between wanting to do something and wanting to want to do something.
I think that's, I was just going to say that with that's so interesting, because I think when we have that like want and the want to want conversation, it almost becomes like, well, it's not a want, so therefore you don't actually want it. It's like, well, no, you still do want those other things. It's just you don't have that drive, you don't have the routine, you don't have the people holding you accountable to get there. So I was going to say I love that asterisk on it. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just what I was going to dive into, or am going to dive into, is this in the military. You get that, right? Everybody talks about the mission and all those sort of things, which, yeah, it's very true. But really, it comes down to the dude to your left and right, and commitment to that dude. Whether it's the guy sitting next to you in the cockpit, the guy next to you in a foxhole, or whatever. That's the guy that you end up committing to. And what's interesting is you don't have to be in a cockpit or a foxhole to feel that. And I remember many times that was, the gym is such a great example, because it's such a definable thing to do, and say, hey, we're going to be there, and yeah, I'm going to be there. Are you going to be there? And because you've committed to somebody, you do it, and that's an interesting aspect. I'm really curious to dive into the thing about where you and David were in life when you realized this, because I think that's an interesting point, because you were still active duty, but you weren't in an action unit. And I wonder if that, kind of sets you for transition out of uniform a little earlier in that realization. Could you talk a little bit about what was going on there?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we weren't deploying down range and in a gunfight for our last duty station, and so yeah, it did give us a little bit of time to reflect and have a little bit of clarity on what we were doing afterwards. I think there's a couple things that happen when you get out of the military, and if you're not cognizant of it, and if you're not intentional about it, it can really, really creep up on you quickly. In the military, like you had said, like we have a mission, we have a purpose. We wake up to every single day and we go attack that mission and purpose, right? We have a community, we have a tribe of people that, like it or not, has been given to you, right? It's forced for you to be in community with other military members, in your command, in your squadron, your co-pilots, whoever they are. It is a forced given community to you. And then you have a schedule. You have a planned event on the calendar most days. There's a show up time and an end time. There's scheduled deployments, there's scheduled trainings, there's scheduled flights. And when you leave the military, that all goes away, especially if you go into kind of this entrepreneur, small business owner world. You have all of that gone. And then again, especially if you leave your last duty station and move somewhere else. So you don't have a mission anymore. You don't have a tribe anymore, and you don't have a schedule anymore. And if you're not intentional about making that happen, it can go downhill really, really fast. And so I think for us, we had some mentors that gave us a little bit of that, but the standard transition program that the military offers, they don't talk about that at all. Mm-hmm. All they talk about is getting a job, right? Filling out your resume to make sure you have a paycheck. And yes, that's important. But I think the high rate of suicide from veterans right now is because of three of those aspects that aren't talked about at all: mission, tribe, and schedule. And I think as soon as you let that stuff go, you get lost and you get lonely. And that's where all this other stuff starts coming up. And that's where PTSD, anxiety, depression, all these other things come into your world. So you got to be careful about that. You got to be cognizant of it, and you got to be intentional with it. You got to go find a tribe. You got to go find a purpose. And purpose doesn't mean a paying job. Like, you can go volunteer. You can be a part of a small group. You can go join a sports team, and that kind of fills community as well. So, so that's a long answer to your question, but we started to realize that because of our own experiences. For a period of time in the transition, my wife would see me like pacing up and down the halls, right? And she's like, "What are you doing? Like, go do something. Get out of the house. Go to the gym. Go meet a buddy. Like, go do something." and I would just find myself pacing because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a set routine. I didn't have a schedule. I didn't have a mission. And again, you gotta find that stuff.
Yeah, well, real quick, Cam. I have to give my plug for two of my favorite nonprofits on that right now. It's the Commit Foundation and the Honor Foundation, which both work very hard to help men and women getting out of the service figure out what they're going to do and why they're going to do it. So go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, I just was really curious, talking about this, one of the things that comes to mind is in some of my coaching with whether college athletes or just, that kind of age bracket. One of the things I talk about so much is that we'll get these lessons from older folks, and it's like, to just put the joke down, we've had so many these people on the podcast, great people and all, but it's this like, hey, I made $50 million and then I got old and realized I didn't spend enough time with my family, and so I changed everything, and now look at me. And then we, as these younger folks, look at it and go, okay, but do I have to make $50 million first? How do I do them both at the same time, kind of thing? And Stu, what you're talking about of like the purpose versus the paying job is kind of that same kind of a vein where it's like there's this reality of you have to build these things and you have to actually go do this work. And then there's like you want to go sit back on a hill and ponder life kind of stuff. How do you recommend that you do those both at the same time, or what's your experience trying to balance those two? Because they always feel like they're at odds with me. Or not with me when I think about that, I guess is a better way to put it.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people equate purpose to paycheck. And I think it's far from the truth. I think you can have a purpose in life. I think you can have a mission. It's very different than the pay that you receive. And I don't think also if you get a lot of pay, that's going to fill that bucket of purpose, right? So I think they're two separate buckets, and I think you can do them at the same time. I think that purpose fulfillment is something internal that God has created you to have a desire for, to fill something that's a higher purpose than yourself. And if you can take that and match it with a career, fantastic. But you don't have to, right? It could be serving at your church, volunteering at a nonprofit organization, coaching a little league baseball team. I'll tell you what, I have found a ton of fulfillment coaching my 6-year-old son's baseball team. I love it. I love being the dad out there, not only for my son, but for all the other sons or all the other kids. And maybe there's some kids on there that don't have a dad, or maybe their dad is divorced and not around. Like, step up and be that dad. Like, that's a very fulfilling, purposeful thing. I don't get paid a thing for it, right? And so I think you can find both. And again, on the job piece, the paycheck piece, money's not going to fulfill anything. It's not going to fulfill your purpose, right? And it's nice to have money. You need to have a job that makes, that keeps the lights on and pays the bills and gives you food on the table. But I'll tell you, and to your point, Cam, you said like, I made $50 billion and then I realized it was all for naught. We've been successful in our real estate careers, and no deal, no like win of selling a house, of a flip, has brought me fulfillment, right? So I think, again, you can kind of put those into two different buckets and you can serve them both at the same time.
Let's jump into this, Stu. I think this is a really good thing to dive into for folks to hear and understand, because you flip that house, you make a $50,000 profit on that flip, you get a huge adrenaline rush, right? I mean, like, yeah, we kicked ass on that one. You and David are high-fiving. Then you got the next one, and you got the next one. So there's this difference in feeling I think we have to capture and explain, in the fact that, yeah, there's that adrenaline rush of closing the deal sort of thing, the salesman, right? And you get that, look at my bank account, which is a different feeling than, let me help these little kids learn how to play baseball. Would you mind unpacking that some? Because I think you got some great experience. I'd love to have you share.
Yeah, I think there's temporary and eternal, right? Temporary is going to be that $50,000 paycheck. It's a one-time thing. And all it really is probably going to do is just push you to want more. And more can be a dangerous thing. The other is, I think, more of an eternal thing, right? how are you discipling? How are you serving a bigger purpose than yourself? So I think it's, an internal, like trying to serve myself versus an external trying to serve other people. Serving other people is always going to give you more fulfillment, more purpose than anything that you're trying to do to, self-serve for your own well-being.
There's an aspect there that I feel like it's because we want the magic pill and it's kind of that side of things, but it's this idea of it's like, but then I don't necessarily feel better. Like Stu, I coach rugby and I do the little kid. I feel the exact same way. I also can tell you I don't walk out of there not necessarily just like everything is perfect. Like there's not this magic feeling that just washes over you. And we kind of have the desire towards that. Do you think that's that like desire for the magic pill, or what do you think that is that kind of causes us to almost cast doubt into this thing that is so great?
Man, that's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer. I think that none of us are perfect. I think we're always have a desire to be better, to grow, to be perfect in any scenario, and we never will be. And so, I think we just have to realize that and understand that we're not going to have the perfect day. We're not going to have everything go right. But if we can learn from it, and if we can grow from it, then we're going to be better the next day, right? So I don't know if I have a really good answer for you, Cam.
I'll jump in there because here's what I adopted years ago. Didn't realize I adopted it, but now that I've walked a couple of steps down that road, I do realize I adopted it much earlier than I thought. It's the belief that my actions help somebody. That belief, whatever that belief may be, I joke about the smile and the nod to somebody that you pass in the Walmart shopping aisle, the finger wave as you're driving down the 2-lane road, that time that you were helping that little kid figure out how to swing the bat, because you never know when it's going to come back. I had the honor of having breakfast with my in-laws at their new apartment with some folks, some of their friends. Mr. Owen had spent 50 some odd years teaching kids at various levels in the Texas education system at various schools and districts around. And we were talking, I was chatting with him about it, and he's had kids come back 30 years later and thank him as a 4th grade, 5th grade teacher.
That's awesome.
You can't do it for the hope of that, but you do it for the belief of that. And I get the same thing from my rugby boys. Every so often I'll get a text from one of the boys. They'll want to stop by the house, or they're just checking in to say hi. And it's been how long since I coached, Cam? 8, 9 years, 10 years?
Yeah, just about 8 years, yeah.
8 years. And, these are the kids that are younger than Camden, that are coming, or that are older than Camden, I should say. Played before Camden played when Camden was hardly old enough to even remember them. And they're coming out of the blue every once in a while. But I didn't do it for the hopes of that, but I did it in the belief that maybe it'll help them. Maybe that thing. And I've talked with plenty of people about coaching and content, and y'all put out content in your podcast. You don't put out your podcast because somebody's going to say, man, that was good.
Right.
Because you can't do that. You put it out and you share that message, you share that information just like we do, because you have a belief that somebody, even if it's just one person, and that one thing that we said in this hour show might help somebody. And that's the powerful belief that we can all adopt to getting back to that fulfillment of purpose and serving people.
Yeah, and you might not ever know. You might not ever know until you get to those pearly gates and there's a line come up to you and says, hey, what you did or what you said, this did this for me, right? You might not ever know until you get to heaven.
Yeah.
But that's pretty cool too.
Oh yeah.
I think there's an interesting piece I'd add to that too. And Dad, I think we talked about this on the last episode, is the idea of how many things it's like the positive and the negative are so connected. Because also, if you spend your life looking for that kind of that, I think the Stoic term would be like the third thing, right? Like not doing the good thing and feeling good, but then the applause, the people thanking you, all those kind of things. Like looking for that then opens you up to this negative thing. Like Dad, you're talking about the wave on the country road. I can tell you probably one of my worst things that I let piss me off so much is when I wave at folks and they don't wave back. And I don't know what that is, but it's that little desire of, it's like, well, no, you're supposed to wave. And it rubs me the wrong way for some reason. But I think that's the same kind of thing. You're looking for this positive, and then therefore you kind of open yourself up to that negative. And so I think that's a really important thing, is like just doing it for the purpose of throwing it out there and not even looking for that. It's cool to find out, I've got a couple little letters from kids I've coached with engaged that are up on the fridge and with little drawings of them playing rugby. It's the coolest freaking thing ever. But if you look for that, then you open yourself up to the disappointment of those things not coming, being angry that somebody doesn't wave at you and all those kind of things. The positive is tied to that negative.
Cam, it's funny, you mentioned that. One of the months that we go through in our mastermind group is giving. We talk about giving and stewardship, and so we challenge the men in our group to think of ways to give with intentionality and purpose. And I have this story of me trying to do that, and we went to a Subway sandwich, like a Jimmy John's or something like that, and I was getting sandwiches for lunch for my family. And there was a homeless lady outside of the store, and she was kind of in the corner sitting there. And I saw her when I walked in, and I thought to myself, this is a prime opportunity to do some giving, right? And so I ordered my family's sandwiches, and then I ordered an extra sandwich. And I came out, I went over, and I gave the sandwich to the homeless woman, and she said, no, thanks. She said, no, I'm good. And I was crushed. I was like, what? I just bought you a sandwich, right? I had this expectation to feel good for my giving, but I didn't get it. And then she said, can I have a bag of chips instead? And then it even made me more angry. And so I went back in reluctantly, bought her a bag of chips, came back out and gave them to her. And she didn't really even say thanks. And so I come back to the car and I tell my wife this, and she's like, well, maybe it wasn't about her, or maybe it wasn't about you. Maybe it was about somebody else who was inside who saw this whole thing go down, right? Maybe it was about the cash register lady who was curious why you came back in and kind of watched this whole thing go down. Maybe it impacted her, but you'll probably never know. And so I think, God has a plan. It's not always our plan, right? And so, that makes me kind of think about this whole conversation of, it's not about what you receive, it's about what others receive.
Yeah, that's such a great story too. Thanks for sharing that, because I was at a vendor I'm doing some work with, and interestingly enough, there was a Subway sandwich shop right next to the vendor, and there was a guy sitting just about 20 yards down the way, and I thought about that. I kind of did the should I, and I did not. I got in the truck and came home. Probably, in truth, in a weird.
You hadn't heard Stu's story yet. That's why.
Well, no, right. In a weird, I hadn't heard his story, but also a weird sort of way of what Stu just had was, no, thank you. Well, shit, what do I do with this sandwich then? I don't even like onions, and I got onions on it for it.
That's right.
I want to shift gears a little bit. Stu, talking about what you do with Kinetic, man. I think it's one of those, it's like we can all see the logic. I think it makes a lot of sense. I can see the impact that it has for folks. Well, then it's kind of one of those things, like, what's the barrier? I think my gut instinct on it is, us men and vulnerability don't really go too well, and this requires vulnerability. Is it that, or what do you think else plays into, why people don't act like this normally without having to, go through the Mastermind with Kinetic?
Yeah, it's a great question, Cam. I think that vulnerability is a huge thing that us men aren't very good at. It kind of feels weird. It feels awkward to like get around another group of guys and talk about your feelings. Like that's just not right, right? Like that's weird. And so I think that, that's not something normal that a lot of men do. I think we're built a certain way, and vulnerability is hard for us. I think another reason that it's hard for us is most of us don't think that we have a problem, right? Most of us think that we're good. And most of us also have a pretty poor definition of success. I think a lot of us think of success as money, wealth, fame, likes on your Instagram account, notoriety. And I think a lot of that comes from the world today, society, what they're throwing out, all the marketing and advertising. And I think a lot of us don't ever take the time, because we're so busy, to really sit down and define what success looks like for us. And more often than not, it's not about the money, the fame, the likes on Instagram. It's about the relationship with our God, with our kids, with our wives, the stewardship, having fun, having solid relationships. Like I don't know, have you ever, there's a book by a guy named Jordan Grummett. He wrote a book called Taking Stock, and he was a hospice doctor. Mm. And so he basically interviews, men and women at the end of their life. And when he come to find out, like, they had a lot of regret, but none of the regret was because like they worked so hard and they made a lot of money. It was all about, the relationships, or the things they didn't say, or the things they didn't do, or the things that they, didn't mend with people, with humans, with connection. And so I think a lot of us have that problem. We think that success is in the big house and the white picket fence, and all the things that the world says are important, but a lot of us don't realize that.
That's an awesome thing, and I just got through with Sebastian Junger's book, "In My Time of Dying," and amazing life lessons there. That powerful, highly recommend it. And in that, don't regret and live it for today. I think is such a powerful thing. Everybody talks about it. I think it comes to this place that we have to go and do it ourselves. But in the irony of doing it yourself, I go back to our good buddy Scotty Mann. He said this on our show. He said it a couple times. He says it on his shows and his talks all the time too. Is nobody's coming. Nobody's coming. And what I mean, and we've talked about this on the veteran suicide piece, in the fact that every veteran I've known that has taken his own life, I never saw any signs of it because they didn't want me to see signs of it, because that would denote a weakness. And I think there's an interesting piece, and this is one of the great things, that when you get in that circle of trust that you've created with your Kinetic Man Mastermind, I think is an interesting thing, in that feeling, I hate to say the words safe space, because it's been ruined in so many other areas. But when you have that trust, when you truly have that trust of people, then you can say, yeah, I do need some help. And how many people, to include this one, have I banged my head to figure out, well, how do I fill out this form here? I'll get it. I'm not going to call somebody and ask them how to fill out that form, because I'll figure this shit out. So I think
nobody wants to stop and ask for directions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh hell no. Thank you, Mr. Phone. So I can, Mr. Google and Apple, I can keep that all in here, and I don't have to worry about that anymore, right?
That's right.
I'm curious with that. Go ahead, Stu. Sorry.
No, I was just a quick little story. Literally this morning, Otis, my 6-year-old, had like a heavy box that he has to take for school to give to his teachers with some, equipment and some school supplies. And I was like, "Hey, buddy, can I help you? Like, let me open the door for you. Let me help you get in and into the truck, so you can get in." And he's like, "No, Dad, I got it. I'm good." And like, it's heavy. Like he's 6, and he wanted to do it on his own. Like he wanted to take it in there and get it on his own. And he was like mad at me for trying to help him. I think that's a lot of us. Like it starts from a very young age of, no, I don't need help. I'm good.
So I'm glad I let you go because speaking of your son and that story there, what I was thinking about is the generational perspectives on this. Because to share a quick story to kind of illustrate this, I think it's always interesting is we talk about like the personal evolution, as we grow and we get better at these different things. But then there's also everything we're doing is kind of being passed down to the people around us, and it feeds out into this culture. The culture we talk about is changing by the fact that we're talking about it. One of my good friends, Grady, I remember he got a call from his mom because there was a death in her workplace, and she was like, "Do you tell your friends that you love them? Like I've heard that men don't." He's like, "Yeah, of course." And I said the same thing to him when he asked me about it. I was like, "Yeah, of course. I tell all of my buddies I love them when I get off the phone." And it's because we heard your generation, Dad, and other generations talk about how they never did that, and so we made that change. And I always think that's a very interesting thing of you can see those changes going. But Stu, what's been your experience kind of seeing those different generational perspectives of this growth?
Yeah, man. I think something that we talk a lot about is modeling. What are we doing? What are we modeling for our children, so that they can then model it for their children. A tagline that we like to talk about a lot in the Kinetic Man is, "We are men with daughters that want to marry us." Right? We are men that our sons want to become, and we are men that our wives want to celebrate. We're trying to model what they can become later on down the road, and it's so true. Again, it kind of comes back to the intentionality piece of, what can I do to show my children what I value? Do I value my relationship with God and reading the Bible and praying? Well, I'm going to have my Bible out on the kitchen table in the morning, knowing that there's a certain time that they're going to wake up and they're going to walk down and they're going to see me reading the Bible. That's intentionality and modeling what that looks like for getting up early and doing a morning routine. They're going to see that I came back from the gym all sweaty, right? I model that to come back from the gym at 6:30, right when they're waking up. Like that's intentional, right? They see me going and doing fun things with my friends. They see these things that I'm prioritizing in my life. They see me holding my wife's hand and opening the door for her and saying I love her and grabbing her and dancing with her in the kitchen. Like they see that stuff, and they now are starting to model some of it. My 6-year-old son, a couple of weekends ago, he went down to the basement. Like I had just come up from working out, and he ran down to the basement and he grabbed these like little dumbbells. He grabbed these like little 3-pound dumbbells, and he came up and he started like doing curls. He's like, "Dad, look at me. Dad, I'm working out. I'm getting strong." I'm like, "Yeah, buddy. All right." They want to be like Dad. Right. So the more that we can think about this stuff, the more we can be intentional about modeling our behaviors and modeling our values, it's going to have an impact on our generations below. Right. And so I think the more we can do that, the better off that our world is going to be in the future.
Yeah, that's so true. And truthfully, it goes beyond, the inner circle of your family, beyond the inner circle of your friends. It's how you show up. Camden, you always talk about putting the carts away in the parking lot,
Yeah.
right? You doing that. There's a guy in there who's getting paid. Yeah, he's getting paid minimum wage, but you know what? He's getting paid to come out and get the carts.
He probably hates me.
Yeah.
Steal my job.
Right. Yeah. My job. But you know what? That when somebody else sees somebody else do something like that, we're humans and we're like, "Oh, that's a good idea." The other great one is you pick up a piece of trash that's laying in the parking lot and you just put it away in the trash can or whatever. You do those little things. You never know who's going to see it and model you and do it, and just make that little shift in the universe to cause that ripple effect of goodness and giving and helping. It's an amazing little thing that I think we take for granted because we're like looking for well, anybody see me? I put that soda can away. You see that? I put it in the recycle bin too. Y'all see that?
Let me post that on Facebook.
Yeah, video me. Yeah.
I'd be curious, actually, mentioning Facebook there. I think that's such an interesting piece of this conversation because, whether it's building a business on it so you can spread it more or, posting on social media so more people see it, there is this pure core there sometimes where it is like, hey, look, I'm putting this out there to show it to more people. But then there's that dark side of the other aspect of it. It's, just vanity and those kind of things. What are your thoughts on that, Stu? Because to me, that like performative nature of it almost, I don't know, I feel like it can sneak in way too easily sometimes.
Oh man, Camden, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I honestly didn't have any social media channel almost my entire Navy career. I didn't have LinkedIn. I didn't have Facebook. And until kind of to your point, like we started some businesses, I quickly realized that it's honestly, it's required. Like to be in business, you got to have a presence. And so I started to kind of try to look at it in a different light and looked at it, how can I be a positive light for social media? How can I, when I am posting, make it to where it's not really about me, but again, kind of it's about others. Right? How can you shine a light on other people? How can you shine a light on an idea? Otis, to your point, how can you give an idea of something that I've done that's made an impact to give that same idea to somebody else, right? Make a post about something that maybe you've done, but it's something that has improved somebody else's life, highlighting other people. So I think, there's ways like you can raise money for great causes on social media. You can help people find a job on social media. You can, there's so many good things that you can do with social media that has a much larger reach than just like your little inner circle, right? And so there's a great aspect of social media. And so I think you just have to use it that way. It's not posting about, look what I did. Instead, kind of reversing that and posting about, look what other people did. Look how you can help these people. Look at this idea that you could maybe serve in a different way. So that's how, I'm not perfect. There's definitely times where I'll post something and I'll just be waiting for the likes to come in. Like I think that's human nature. So I'm definitely not perfect in that, but that's how I try to look at social media is like, what can I do to highlight somebody else? What can I do to serve somebody else, help somebody else?
I love that because I love that distinction because that's one of those things, growing up in social media, it's like the workout post. And it's like, I didn't work out unless I posted
selfie.
Like those kind of things where it's like, hey, are you doing it for you or are you doing it to post? And because I know I've done it myself where I have my daily stoic that I try to read every day. And just reading any book really. And I'm taking the picture of my coffee and my book and I'm posting at 6 a.m. feeling so good about it. And I do that once and the next morning I sleep in and it's like, oh my gosh, you freaking phony. And so I think it's like, you have to be aware of what you're doing with that. Like, what is the intention behind it? I love that.
Yeah, so like that same post, right? The same post of you, with your coffee and your book and you're reading at 6 a.m. Like it can go two different ways. One way is, hey, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. I woke up early and I have my morning routine. I'm so good. I'm reading the book. I'm learning, I'm growing. Or it could be, hey, check out this book. This author is awesome. Go read this book. It will impact your life. Same exact post, but put very differently. One is serving yourself and one is serving the author.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great. I want to dissect something that, since we're talking about social media, there's a human nature to pull us towards negativity, and there's a number of things, and that's not really what I want to talk about. But what I'd really like for you to share is what's your personal routine that you do, because we need to be an informed people. And if we're on social media, we're going to get those negative things. If we're informed people, as we should be, to be an informed citizen, we're watching or reading the news, we're to understand a larger picture than what's in my backyard. How do what's your process for handling that negative pull that really wants to grab hold of you?
I can't. It was a buddy of mine who once said, "Our job is to create and not consume." And so I look at social media that way. I try to create on social media. I do very little of consuming. I don't watch the news. Maybe to a default, maybe to like a detriment. I have no idea what's going on with the presidential race. I'll be honest. Don't know, don't care. I honestly, personally, don't think it impacts me personally that much. People might say it does. There are, laws and regulations that sure they do, but there's so much negativity about it. So much, right? So I just don't listen to it. I don't watch it. I don't listen to it. I just cut it out. I don't consume. So I love to create positivity, to social media stuff. I try to serve other people and post on it and post good ideas and stuff that we're doing inside the Kinetic Man. So that's really how I look at it, Otis, is like, I don't consume any of that junk. I just don't let it into my brain. I just completely cut it out. I will kind of to the morning routine stuff. Like I have a rule that I don't look at my phone for the first hour of the day. I put it aside. I get up, I brew a cup of coffee, I read the Bible, I do a journal, I do a devotional, and then I'll go work out. And by the time that's all done, it's an hour, and I don't look at and I've made, again, I'm not perfect. I'll look at it every now and then. I'll read an email or look at something on the news or social media. And when I do that, I immediately regret it, because more often than not, it's something negative. It's something that like starts out my day wrong. It's something that happened in a real estate transaction that like we got to figure out. It's something that happens that's negative. Like the devil's there, and he's gonna make everything come to you in a negative fashion. And so yeah, I try not to consume any of that stuff.
No, that's such a great thing to think about. I did for my last few years in the Army, and probably the first 4 or 5 years retired. Whenever my screen was up in my browser, I kept Fox News up. And it's no ding on Fox News. It could have been any of the news channels. And it was like I was constantly checking it. Constantly. And then it's like, oh, man. I finally realized what a drain. What a drain it was on anything. And just as bad as the dopamine hit you get with the scrolling through social media. It was that kind of a thing. And it was like, oh man. And I cut that stuff.
And it goes back to the intentionality part, right? You cut it out. I think back to, I use this example all the time because I think it summarizes it so well, especially with, again, my generation I coach. But it's like people will say they play video games to relax, and then they breaking controllers, yelling, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, hey, you're saying this thing, and it's clearly not that. Therefore, either you change the way you're doing it, or you find another activity. And same kind of thing. If you're opening up Instagram just to pass the time and have a little bit of fun and see some funny videos of dogs and that kind of stuff, well, then make sure you're doing that and stop following Fox News and CNN and all of those on Instagram. It's like you can create the thing that you're looking for, but going back to your point at the very beginning, Stu, it's about connecting those words, that intention of what you really want to your actions, what you're taking. And also, it's much easier to cut it out than it is to try to build your algorithm the right way.
For sure. I mean, try this for, try it for a day. Just take off all social media on your phone. Remove the apps. See what it does.
I bet you the sky
for most, the sky will not fall. But for most, that's really hard. That's really hard to do.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? Here's a great physical much more contextual thing. If you're trying to lose weight, throw away them chocolate chip cookies. Get rid of the ice cream that's in the freezer.
That's right.
I mean, if you're trying
Make the decision easier.
Yeah. Take the temptation away, I think is probably the broader sense of it. What? Back to the intentionality and doing what you say you're going to do. If I'm going to lose weight, then probably ought to get rid of, if I'm tempted by those things, I ought to get rid of my temptations. Pretty simple. So, and that simplicity. But I bet you simplicity. I think I might use that word.
Let's add that to the dictionary.
Simplicity.
I like that.
Yeah, because it sounds pretty important. But that's not what I learned is how to make up new words, because I've learned that a long time. I'm always making up new words. Watch a few of my videos and this podcast a couple of times, and you'll hear some Otisisms. I think it's the reminder, because this is so powerful, because we, and I'll include you, even though you're not really my generation, Stu, but we created this generation that, I don't want to say entitlement, because I don't believe in that, but in this belief that my purpose has to put money in my bank account. And I think there's so much more to life than that. I mean, I when I was coaching rugby, the rugby coaching thing in the bigger picture was my purpose. And I would tell people the reason I'm working is so that I could coach. And again, one of those, I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I did. And that's so much more important of a lesson to understand and not feel lost and incomplete in our lives of, well, this is giving me a paycheck, but it's not fulfilling my purpose, so I'm going to quit. Okay. Maybe you need to do a little bit more soul searching on what your purpose is and how you can accomplish, how you can fulfill your purpose. So that's what I learned as a great reminder. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I'm learning right now that I think we need to do an episode, and you and I talked about it before, but the perpetual problem idea of it just creates another one. Because why did your generation create a generation of entitlement? Because you guys didn't have crap, and so you had to do that. Like and it just keeps going and going like that. It makes so much logical sense when you zoom out a little bit. So we might have to do a full episode on that. But the other piece for me really was, the posting for others, not yourself, Stu. After we had that bit of this conversation, I thought about it. It's like, if I go to my Instagram right now, it's all pictures of my wife, because I feel comfortable doing that because of exactly that effect. And I've never made that connection, but it makes so much sense.
I love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Stu, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Yeah. I wrote this down as we were talking. I said, don't place a condition or an expectation on the response of someone that you're serving. If you go to serve, don't have some expectation. Don't have some like placed condition that I've put on it for a response to that, because more than likely it's not going to be the response that you have placed, and it's going to, disappoint you. So if you can go in and serve with just the idea of serving and not have any type of condition or expectation of response to that.
Yeah, there's a great Marcus Aurelius quote that says to ask yourself, if I've done something good for the world, for someone else, then I've had my reward. Nice and easy. Stu, how do people connect with you, follow you, find out more about the Kinetic Man?
Yeah, so we also have a podcast. It's called the Kinetic Man Podcast. It's on pretty much every podcast player that you can find that you listen to. So go check that out. We do have a website, thekineticman.com. And if it's okay, Otis and Camden, we have just like this free PDF that we send out. One of the things that we really like to talk about is just family and connection, and being intentional about having deeper conversations than just like, how was your day at school? We really challenge the men in our group to like prioritize sitting around a dinner table and having deeper conversations. And so we actually came up with a list of like 100 questions, 100 intentional questions that will require a deeper conversation than just like, how was your day? We love to give that out for free. So if any of your audience wants that, they can just send me an email. The email is Stuart@thekineticman.com. send an email to me, and I'll give you that PDF of 100 questions.
Awesome, man. Thanks. Yeah, that fits right in line with the book I'm reading right now, Fierce Conversations. So we'll have to do a little check and balance and see how it applies with those questions.
There you go.
Good deal, man. Hey, we really appreciate you taking out some time out of your day today to spend it with us.
This was fun. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam Otis, and a special thanks to our guest, Stu Grazier, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass them on to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see you all next time.